In this video, I'm going to be discussing absolute value functions and how to graph them. The absolute value graph is very similar to the y equals x graph. However, here's what happens. Absolute value means that whenever you plug in a number for x, it will always give you a positive answer. So if you were to take the function y equals x, the moment you were to plug in -1 for x, instead of getting a -1 for y, it actually is going to give you a positive because the moment you take the absolute value of -1, it is going to give you a positive. So if I was to plug in -2, normally I would get -2, but again, because you're plugging it into an absolute value, it's actually going to turn positive. So the absolute value graph, it actually looks like a V. The vertex of it is the lowest or the highest point of that V. So in this case, the vertex is 0, 0. You can translate absolute value functions up and down. So if you were to take the parent function, which is the absolute value of x, and you were to move the entire graph down 2, then the function would look like the absolute value of x, but then you're subtracting 2 from that. The vertex also changes. If you notice, instead of the vertex being 0, 0, the vertex becomes 0, -2. In this case, you can also translate the function up. And so it would be the absolute value of x, and then you are adding 3 to that absolute value of x. Again, the vertex also changes. So instead of it being 0, 0, it becomes 0, 3. So whatever the value is outside the absolute value, that is going to become the y value of your vertex. A horizontal translation is slightly different. If you notice, when you're translating it to the right, it actually changes signs of the inside of the absolute value. And the reason is because what value of x is going to give you 0? A positive 3 in this case. So a positive 3 minus 3 gives you 0. So that is why you actually move it to the right 3. And if you notice, the vertex also changes from 0, 0 to 3, 0. So if you notice, if you were to take the opposite sign of whatever is inside the absolute value, it is going to become your x value of your vertex. If you were to translate it left, it becomes a positive 2 on the inside. Again, and the reason is because what would make this absolute value 0? And the answer would be a -2. -2 plus 2 gives you 0, and so that is why you actually move it to the left to the -2. And again, if you notice, the vertex also changes. So whatever value is inside the absolute value, you actually take its opposite sign. A +2 actually means that the vertex is going to become a -2. Now you can combine translations both horizontally and vertically. So if this is the parent function where the vertex is 0, 0, you can move it over 1, and you can also move it up 4. So it moved right 1, and it moved it up 4. So therefore, if we remember, the translation of it going left and right, since it went right 1, you actually take the opposite sign. A positive 1 means you actually do a -1. Why? Because a positive 1 is what gives us 0. And then it moved up 4, which means you just add 4 to the outside. So this vertex, this new vertex, is the coordinate point 1, 4. The x value becomes its opposite sign, and the y value does exactly what it says, +4 on the outside. So again, the outside moves up and down. The inside moves left and right, but it actually moves in the opposite direction. There is another type of transformation, which is a reflection. If you have a negative on the outside of the absolute value, it actually will flip which is where you could either say it flips the graph, or you could say it reflects across the x-axis. Here is the x-axis, and it actually reflects across the x-axis. Both of these mean that you are basically taking the absolute value function and you are either reflecting across the x-axis or you are flipping it. There's two other types of transformations, a shrink and a stretch. And this is basically changing the slope. So instead of the parent function moving up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, the 2 means that you move it up 2 over 1. And in this case, the 1/3 is a slope where you move it up 1 over 3. It actually changes the slope of the absolute value graph. So let's combine the transformations and determine what this new graph should look like. First, we moved it right 3. It moved down 4. And then it flipped. So moving right and left is what happens on the inside of the absolute value. Remember, it's the opposite sign. So it is going to be x minus 3. When you move it right 3, you actually take the opposite sign. You moved it down 4, so it's going to be a minus 4. And then you also flipped it, which means you have a negative in front. Again, don't forget, the number on the outside goes up or down. It went down 4, so it's a minus 4. The inside moves left and right. It went to the right 3, so you do its opposite sign of a minus, and then it flipped, which is why it is a negative in the front.